It was the day before Thanksgiving. 1971. A quiet, nondescript man in his mid-40s walked up to the counter at Portland International Airport. He wore a dark suit, a raincoat, and a thin black tie. He paid cash for a one-way ticket on Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305, bound for Seattle. He gave his name as Dan Cooper. Nobody who saw him that afternoon would have looked twice. That was the point. He boarded the Boeing 727, took seat 18C near the back of the plane, and lit a cigarette. The flight was short, barely 30 minutes in the air, and utterly ordinary, right up until the moment it wasn't. Shortly after takeoff, Cooper waved down a flight attendant named Florence Schaffner and handed her a folded note. She assumed it was a phone number, the kind of thing a lonely businessman might slip a stewardess, and she tucked it into her purse without reading it. Cooper leaned in close and told her quietly that she should read the note. He had a bomb in his briefcase. She opened it. The note was typed and precise. It said he had a bomb. It said she should sit next to him. She did. When she asked to see the device, Cooper cracked open his briefcase, just enough to show her a tangle of wires and red cylinders, enough to convince her and later the crew that this was not a bluff. His demands followed: $200,000 in $20 bills and 4 parachutes. Not 2, 4. It was a detail that would haunt investigators for decades. Did he plan to take a hostage skydiving with him? Was it a bluff, meant to convince the FBI the chutes would be inspected and safe? Or did he simply want spares? The captain radioed the demands to the ground. Northwest Orient's president authorized the payment without hesitation. The airline would rather lose the money than a plane full of people. While the cash and parachutes were gathered, the 727 was ordered to circle above Puget Sound for nearly 2 hours. Passengers had no idea anything was wrong. They were told only that the flight was experiencing a minor mechanical delay. Cooper, meanwhile, sat calmly. He ordered a bourbon and soda. He paid for it. He tipped. When the plane finally landed in Seattle, Cooper allowed all 36 passengers, and 1 flight attendant to, disembark in exchange for the money. In the parachutes, he kept the pilot, co-pilot, flight engineer, and 1 attendant, Tina Mucklow, aboard. He gave the crew explicit instructions for the next leg of the flight. Fly toward Mexico City, stay below 10,000 feet, keep the landing gear down, flaps at a specific angle, cabin unpressurized, and the rear stairway, the aft air stair built into the tail of the 727, left down and unlocked. Anyone who knew anything about aviation understood immediately what that meant. He wasn't going to Mexico. He was going to jump. The plane took off again just after 7:30 p.m. into a cold, black, rainy Pacific Northwest night, somewhere over the wooded, mountainous terrain of southwest Washington, with the rear stairway lowered and freezing wind howling through the cabin. A warning light on the cockpit dash flickered, an indication that the air stair had been activated. At around 8 p.m., Tina Mucklow, the last crew member allowed near him, said goodbye to Cooper and stepped forward into the cockpit as instructed, sealing the curtain behind her. A few minutes later, the crew felt a distinct pressure bump, as though a door had opened and shut. Nobody saw him go. There was no scream, no radio call, no goodbye. One moment, the modified Boeing was carrying an armed hijacker. D.B. Cooper had jumped out of the back of a commercial airliner at night in a rainstorm, wearing a business suit and loafers, with $200,000 in cash strapped to his body, and he was never seen again. The FBI opened a case file under the placeholder name from the hijacking. They called the investigation NORJAC, short for Northwest Hijacking. It would become the only unsolved commercial airplane hijacking in American history. In the days that followed, agents scoured the presumed drop zone, a rugged stretch of forest near Ariel, Washington, on foot, by helicopter, with dogs and ground teams. They found nothing. No body, no parachute, no briefcase, no bomb, real or fake. What they did have was physical evidence left behind on the plane. The clip-on tie, Cooper had loosened and removed before jumping, 8 cigarette butts he'd smoked in his seat, and the unused parachutes. Decades later, that tie would yield a partial DNA profile, one of the few tangible clues in the entire case, though it's never been enough to name a suspect with certainty. Investigators built a profile from what witnesses remembered: calm under pressure, familiar, enough with the 727's mechanics to know exactly what he was asking for, but oddly unfamiliar with parachuting jargon based on a few questions he asked the crew. That contradiction, technical aviation knowledge paired with apparent inexperience as a skydiver, became one of the case's enduring puzzles. Was he a former paratrooper putting on an act, or an aviation buff taking an enormous, possibly fatal, gamble? For years, the FBI leaned toward a grim theory that Cooper hadn't survived. He'd jumped into freezing rain and high winds, wearing street clothes, with no experience in night jumps into forested terrain. The parachute he chose wasn't steerable. If he'd struck trees or a ridge, or simply been unable to control his landing in the dark, his remains could easily have been lost in thousands of acres of dense Pacific Northwest wilderness. Then, in February 1980, the family picnicking along the Columbia River near Vancouver, Washington, made a discovery that reopened everything.